Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 284? 284! What was the chapter called? What did Viz call it for this week? Is it something good? Wait, let me just check. And of course, this thing is coming early. Who knows what's going on? Deep Blue Battle. Deep Blue Battle. Deep Blue Battle. Why would you call it Deep Blue Battle? It's because Bakugo was about to freak out. Anyway, hey everyone, it's Tripl-L here to do chapter 284. Now, just very quick thing I gotta say. You might notice a difference when we go into the page-by-page walkthrough because I'm not 100%. I am going to take a pause after doing my general notes, so you might notice a change in the environment or something like that. But just keep that in mind. I've been going too hard on the live streams. Speaking of live streams, I just wanted to say to Sarge, you were right. I was being too stubborn in how I was reading that thing. You were right in how you read it. Props to you, of course, Sarge. Anyway, chapter 284, the general notes I think are going to be really good for this chapter. Initially, I was going to come in here and I was going to be talking to you guys about what it meant that we were having drama about the fourth user, the guy with the scars. I was going to talk to you guys about what it meant that that thing was coming up right now, because in the original fan translation, it seemed it had a very different impression than what the final translation is. And now, mind you, the fan translation you could tell was not the best this week because they had parts just didn't make sense. So the fan translation was subpar this week, and then you come into this chapter, and it's like the tone significantly changes. So in the fan translation, I would have been saying that there was some kind of long-term thing. I would have been telling you like, oh guys, you know, there's an indication here that there might be that makes me feel a little bit better about the future of Hero Academia. When you come into the actual proper translation from Viz, however, this quickly becomes very depressing. There is something that is brewing here in the background, and it's going to be pretty wild. How I'm reading this. Now, the way we're going to go through this for the general notes, I'm going to focus your attention on a collection of pages that tell the story of what's going on here. So the pages that we have to look at specifically are page 4, page 9, page 10 and 11, page 15, and page 16 and 17. Those are the pages that matter for this particular part. On page 4, what matters is context on Bakugo. Now, like in the last chapter, I believe, Bakugo was very frustrated when Izuku went ahead of him. Now, with the things that the author had set up earlier, I thought, especially with Bakugo's rhetoric about keeping up, I was veering more towards Bakugo is upset that he's not keeping up with Izuku. But then when you look at this chapter, there's new context. The context being he's not afraid about not keeping up. He's afraid for Izuku. That's what's really coming out here. He is absolutely concerned. Like when you see him in this chapter telling Endeavor to hurry up and make sure he doesn't miss this time, he's doing that out of intense concern for Izuku. And the story really comes out in the remaining pages for that particular thing. Now, as we go into this, what I'm going to say is it looks like a disaster is about to occur. It looks like Izuku is about to screw himself up. It looks like some aspect of One for All is about to make itself known. And it's an aspect of One for All that is serious enough that All Might doesn't want to talk about it just yet. The fact that Anna, I remember someone on the live stream was saying, I think it was Animamus, was very surprised with the way that All Might responded to Bakugo. This seems to be something of a higher order in terms of the seriousness of the problem. Anyway, right now, if I was to give like a quick guess as to what that could be, I would say that it's something like One for All is going to ruin Izuku. Maybe like One for All is going to sap his life force, or like not something like that, but like One for All is going to lead him to destruction kind of thing. Okay, so let's look at the construction of how we can get to that kind of idea, and we'll go to page 9. Here's the page. So the author did something pretty cool here. Bakugo and All Might were having a nice conversation. You have this moment of silence between the two, and then Bakugo starts the new conversation, starting with Deku trusts you with his life. But, so that conjunction right there, that's the most important thing. Is that what it's called? It's called conjunction? Oh, whatever, you know, the but. The but's the most important thing. He establishes that Izuku trusts All Might a lot, but yet All Might is keeping things from Izuku. So this is the first thing. That's a negative thought that's occurring right there. And then Bakugo refers to the notebook about the successors, and he talks about the summary for the fourth successor. And the pages that he references I have them also pulled up here, so we'll talk about them in a second. Anyway, what we know for sure is that the cause of death for the fourth isn't there. And we know that it was crossed out, which probably means that All Might does know what happened to the fourth, but he didn't want to bring it up. So that adds in that there's a level of secrecy about a known quantity. And then from there we go into Bakugo talking about when he brought it up, All Might didn't tell him everything. Now, I'll show you page 257 over here. What Bakugo refers to as bringing it all up must be specifically the line where he says they all died young. That must be Bakugo who is saying it. So Bakugo had, and right before that, in this panel, he has been quiet and he said that makes sense. So the specific spot where he says that All Might didn't tell him everything must be specifically where All Might says yes, that's true. The yes and the dot dot dot. So what that means to me, if we're reading this and the English is correct here, that indicates that there is a little bit more going on behind how the fourth user died young. The fourth user right now, when you look at the image of the fourth user, there's a good chance that this guy did not die by All for One's hands. And the indicator in that here is specifically from the way that he's depicted compared to the others. Banjo is beaten bloody. He is destroyed. The guy that he gave the quirk to, who gave it to Nana, also is beaten bloody. He lost an arm. But when you look at the fourth user is bestowing something upon Banjo. He's praying towards Banjo. Now, mind you, he might be missing his whole lower half, but he looks significantly better than the other two do. What that seems to indicate to me is that his death was caused by an irregular circumstance. And this is what ultimately leads Bakugo to telling All Might that did he figure something out about One for All. So once Bakugo moves into the direction of, is there something going on with One for All, and All Might essentially confirms it by saying not yet and saying that he doesn't want to speculate about things that he's unsure of. What we're ultimately ending up with is a situation where there is something specific to One for All that All Might is suspicious of. He doesn't want to bring it up because he doesn't want to worry Izuku, which indicates there is a negative factor potentially at play when it comes to One for All. Now, initially when we read this in the fan translation, I really thought this would be a nice, a drama point for later. Like when Izuku meets the fourth guy will have some kind of unique gimmick to him. Maybe he'll be able to tell about the story of the third guy. Maybe he was like a villain before. When the fan translation had it, they brought up, they questioned the nature of the fourth user. But now here, we're specifically seeing, what we're questioning here is the nature of how One for All interacted with the fourth user. Right now, it looks like the fourth user did not necessarily die, did not necessarily get murdered. It seems more like he might have just burnt his life out. That would be like my most extreme guess right now. There might be some more little gimmicks going on in there, however. Anyway, the idea that One for All is going to hurt Izuku, it continues getting worse from there when Bakugo starts to go into his monologue, where both characters are establishing that the problem here is that we can't let Izuku know about the problems that are going on with One for All and the fourth user, because as they point out, Izuku doesn't take himself into account. Now, the next interesting line is when Bakugo says that something doesn't feel right and it makes him want to keep Izuku at arm's length. Now, this is probably the line that I'm most questioning because the fan translation made it seem more like that doesn't feel right. They made it seem like he was referring to the past, but when you go into the Viz translation and Bakugo is starting the sentence with, and now that he can do so much more, that's locking his particular feeling about keeping Izuku at arm's length to the present currently. So if Bakugo is at a point where he's watching this, and he's saying that with all this new power, something doesn't feel right, Bakugo has heightened senses for this type of thing. Like, Bakugo's always been competent. So if this set of lines is correct with locking things to the present, then this gives the impression that Bakugo is watching out for Izuku. Specifically, he is watching out for something going on with One for All. His suspicions from the previous pages push that fact forward, and then when you see the rest of his behavior, if you go into it thinking he's concerned about One for All going too far with Izuku, that makes sense. So All Might also brings up that this is Bakugo's way of atoning, and you know, honestly, if that is Bakugo's way of atoning, then you can just say like, well, yeah, Bakugo being Izuku's protector in this manner would be a nice way of him atoning. Anyway, after that, the pages we gotta go to are page 15. So the reason page 15 is important is because the rhetoric that's been established with Bakugo saying that there is something suspect about One For All going on is continued by Izuku on these pages. Specifically where he is talking about, and One For All is a power passed down for the sole purpose of beating All For One. Izuku right now is invoking the nature of One For All and what he believes to be the nature of One For All. When he's invoking this, what he's ultimately setting up is for the author to pull the rug out from under him and very quickly contradict that by saying, oh no, there is something else going on with One For All. Like, really, the whole thing about One For All can be very easily destroyed, or like One For All's rhetoric can be destroyed by simply questioning the original user's motives. You know, we see the original user's memories, but is there any guarantee that the original user does not fabricate those memories? There might be a situation where something that we've been told here is unreliable. Now, mind you, it might just be a more nuanced situation. It might just be that One For All, the quirk itself, is just more dangerous than the users who are within it. Kind of hard to tell. It's hard to tell how exactly things work here. Maybe the One For All original wielder is more desperate, more obsessed than we gave credit for. Honestly, the author just needs to throw in a little bit of a wrinkle, and he could change up the dynamics between One For All and Izuku and how they interact. What are the odds of something deeper being below the surface? Hard to say. I mean, the One For All situation has always been premised on one fundamental mystery. That is, we don't know the reason why One For All ultimately was given the stockpile quirk. We don't know. Like, All Might starts that whole conversation off by, we don't know if that was his brother being kind to him or his brother taking pity on him or wanting him to suffer. We legitimately don't know where exactly we went there. I mean, like, One For All gives us an idea, but again, there is reason to doubt One For All when it comes to the veracity of those particular events. Anyway, the problem here is that Izuku is hyping this moment up. He says now's the moment to let it all out. Everything that One For All has to offer. That is concerning. And then we go into page 16 and 17, which finish up the rhetoric, no matter what happens to me. So now that Izuku has established that he is willing to go all out, in spite of whatever is going to happen to him, that might give One For All the total permission to just wreak havoc. Whatever brought down the fourth user, whatever secret All Might stumbled across that he decided not to share with these people, may be coming out here. So now the other thing that we have to look at here is how the author went about constructing this, and we have to look back at chapter 257. This isn't a last minute thing. Initially, I wanted to say that it was a last minute thing, but then you look at 257, no, it's been there the whole time. It's just, he did an interesting trick to get our mind off the fourth user, specifically with that scratched out page. I haven't looked back at my previous 257 video to see what past me thought about that scratched out page. I think I noticed the scratch out, but I think I also noted that because we can't read Japanese, we don't know what was scratched out. But by the author setting up 257, where he was talking so confidently about 4th, 5th, and 6th, that innately biases the reader to think it wouldn't be these people that would have gotten scratched out. It would have been maybe 2 and 3, because those were the two that we didn't have information on. So there is a little bit of an interesting trick going on in there in terms of, it's not it's manipulation, like by bare definition, it's manipulation, but this is like the good kind of manipulation. This trick that he used is, overloading the mind with information. If someone overloads your mind with information about a particular topic, you're not very likely to question if that particular topic is is wrong, when that person also acknowledges that they don't know about particular aspects within the topic. So, you know, you have the overarching statement, they all died young, and then you have the trick coming in when All Might says, yes, that's true. The trick here is that, yes, they all died young, but there was a small stipulation, but because we had gotten so much information, we had no reason to believe that the small stipulation would have come from the the 3 or 4 that we knew for absolute surety. So it's an interesting idea. Anyway, the fact that the author has been careful with this and was also very careful in how he had Bakugo interact with All Might means that this has been a situation that's been planned for a very long time. And if it is a situation that's been planned for a very long time, it has total potential of being absolutely tragic. Now, what exactly is going to be unleashed here is ultimately the big question. But given that there is someone's death involved in the background, that already kind of biases us to a pretty aggressive shonen type thing. Like Izuku's life is going to be shaved up. One Piece does this a lot. A lot of times they say like Luffy's gonna lose 10 years off his life, or this other character is gonna lose a couple of years off their life. Reverting to burning out someone's lifespan is a common thing in Shonen Jump. So we have to be ready for that. Now, this one thing that's exciting is that this might also lead the way to the Deus Ex Machina. And if we're talking about like a one-for-all overload, like what does Deus Ex Machina look like? Like Izuku becomes God for a little bit. That might be what the Deus Ex Machina looks like. Like Izuku goes all out. Like Izuku does something ridiculous. Like that's the only thing I can imagine. One thing we can say though is that right now it doesn't look like the issue is specifically the fourth user's quirk, because from the way that Bakugo is talking about this specifically, that he addressed the cause of death and didn't mention anything about the fourth user's quirk. And then the fact that All Might also said in 257 that he found the quirks for the 4th through 7th users. Considering that that's the thing, you know, it doesn't seem to me like this is something that's going to come from the 4th. It seems to me that this is something that's going to come from the One for All power package. It's just interesting that there's something that happened related to One for All that started as early as the 4th generation of users. That's a very interesting detail. Anyway, that's it for the general notes, guys. Thanks for watching this part. I'm going to do the page-by-page walkthrough now. I don't know how future me is going to do it, but I hope future me does it right. Okay, I am back, and you may have noticed, but the lighting is significantly different, and we're in a different angle. Yes, past me left me with a lot of chores. Any hoosers, hey guys. Alright, so we're going to do the page-by-page walkthrough now. Let's just begin. So page 1, most important thing I think is the lack of control that we see on Black Whip. Now what's interesting is how this went, because from the perspective of creating a manga, like here's what I think really happened. I think the author wanted to have like a really cool cliffhanger, which I think he did, but it looks like he wasn't keen on managing a battle with everyone in the air. Now mind you, like that's my guess based on just how quickly this situation was reverted. Like logically, Izuku never had to lift the people into the air with him, given that he's doing just fine now. But at the same time, you know, the author was able to use this to show the situation with Izuku's control. So ultimately, it's still a valuable thing. So I think, like at worst, this is really good cliffhanger management. Now, just to clarify why I'm talking about the cliffhanger nature here is because like we know from some examples in Shokugeki no Soma and maybe some other series that the Shonen Jump series will push for a cliffhanger just to raise excitement, which, you know, nothing wrong with that. That's just the nature of the beast. That's part of the medium. But you have to admit that when you look at this, when you go to the immediately going into the air and immediately putting them back down, it's anticlimactic. That does reek of trying to make an exciting cliffhanger to me. Page 2, Bakugo is ridiculously worried, so props on the author for doing such a good job depicting his concern. We also had Endeavor kind of wallowing in his weakness there. Now, Endeavor's dialogues might indicate that he's going to be actually be able to contribute to something though, or at the very least, this event may lead to a conversation with Izuku later, maybe some kind of reflections on what it means to be number 1 when you're being sidelined like that. We move on to page 3. The biggest thing here is that Shigaraki thinks he can steal One for All. It's just very interesting when we're still in the steal terminology, just because, well, One for All, it can't be stolen. So right now we're in a position where One for All has safety mechanisms, and All for One thinks he can steal One for All. One of these two factors is going to have to be correct, and we don't know which one it's going to be. Like, I can't fathom how the doctor's augmentations can make something that could not be stolen before be stolen now, especially when it's on a biological level like this. It's kind of hard to fathom. I really wonder what Shigaraki means when he says steal. Page 4. Now, we talked about Bakugo's faces, but Izuku's art is also worth commenting on. Izuku looks pretty rabid. He looks like a rabid rabbit. His own mind, I think, is in a questionable state of desperation. So, in this shot, when I see Bakugo looking on, it seems more like he's not really that worried about Shigaraki, and more just worried about Izuku in general. Which is reinforced with the flashback, which is entirely about Izuku's flaw. Although you could still say, like, he's still worried for Izuku being in a fight with such a dangerous person. I am very excited for the next couple of weeks to see if we get some kind of clarity as to what's going on here in Bakugo's mind. But at the very least, we can say he's concerned for Izuku. We go to page 5. This is the start of the flashback, and we got Afro Izuku. The big thing is, of course, Ochako calling Bakugo a jerk. I found it really funny. Actually, the whole training session was adorable. I really wish we had more of this, honestly. It was cute to see Seiro and Suyu there, and them doing a little thing where they all spoke one after the other. That was really neat. Page 6 features aggressive lies from All Might, and honestly, I just thought it was really clever. I thought it was clever how they justified the situation. And of course, I think the rhetoric that Bakugo was going on about with All Might about it's going to be a matter of time before everyone finds out. I think that was all worthwhile. We are in a situation now where a lot of people are going to be questioning, hey, Izuku, like, what's going on? Question is, are we going to be in a situation where people can actually ask Izuku, like, hey, what's going on? So page 7, it specifically tells us how float works, and specifically tells us that Izuku is propelling himself with Air Force. I think we could say we expected something like this, but this was a really nice way of explaining Izuku's movement options. So props to the author, really slick explanation. Like this is definitely an example of show and tell, which I really appreciate. This page also tells us how they went about the training. And at this point, you might recall that I was seeking a compromise last week. And right now, it's legit concerning that they couldn't trigger the quirk in this time. But you know what? I'm okay with this. I think this was well implemented. The thing I was fearing was characters floundering as they tried to figure it out. But seeing that All Might had the idea to get Izuku to the point that he knew what to do once he got the quirk, I think that's competence. I think that people realizing there's a terrible situation here and coming up with a solution to mitigate the worst case scenario. Completely different from what the heroes over at the mansion thought to do with Gigantomachia. So definitely appreciated that. I think props to the author. It's a legit good move, and it establishes as well that these quirks aren't going to come so easily, and it also in a way it kind of says that the author is more likely going to reveal the majority of the quirks at the most desperate moments, which is going to help the excitement factor of the manga. And we already have that kind of shenanigan happening with sudden quirk expansion, like when Toga got her quirk expanded to be able to copy other people's quirks that she's transformed into. So something like that. More precedence is being set. That's pretty much what's going on here. Next is page 8. We already chatted about this page, but there is something else. All Might mention that it's not just bad people that want power. And this is a very nuanced point. Like what All Might is alluding to is a situation where people put Izuku in an unfair situation, much like Night Eye did. So could you imagine someone telling Izuku to give the quirk to Endeavor because Endeavor has the best odds of using it well against a super powerful villain? Could you imagine people begging Izuku for handouts? Like the kid barely got past Mirio, and the only reason he managed to get past that as a moral conundrum was because Mirio, it was just a really nice guy who was actually mature enough to be able to see what was the better answer. So yeah, you know, in some ways, good people are more dangerous for someone's heart and sensibilities than villains. And it's very interesting that All Might brought that point up. Now, on page 11, I just want to remind you guys that I'm not certain of my read on Bakugo for this particular line. I think I mentioned that in the earlier portion. You know, I'm thinking it might indicate Bakugo feels something is wrong, but at the same time, I want to say it's likelier that Bakugo is just talking about his own personal problems. Just so you get a sense of how different this page is from the fan translation, like check this out. So Viz says he just deep down, he doesn't take himself into account, you know. He's always been like that, and now that he can do so much more, something doesn't feel right. It makes me want to keep him at arm's length. He goes on to say, but back then I ignored my own weakness, so I ended up bullying him. Now when you go over to the fan translation, what it says is kind of different. That bastard doesn't realize how special he is. Must have been part of his upbringing, even now where he's advanced so far. It used to annoy the hell out of me. I wanted to keep my distance from him. I pushed back my own feelings of weakness that manifested within me, and I bullied him for that. So there is a little bit of difference with what Bakugo is saying. Like, the part that I'm really just bothered by is the past tense, present tense situation. In the fan translation, it's much more clear that Bakugo is talking about his own personal problem, whereas in the Viz translation, there is still an unsettling feeling being established in the present moment. So it's just a little bit annoying. I'd love to know what you guys, how you guys read this, because this might just be an issue of my English not being up to par. Anyway, I think just the fan translation flows better for depicting Bakugo's turmoil, and then I just think the Viz translation shows more of Bakugo's concern. So page 12, we have All Might saying that they'll get a chance to talk. But the comparison that All Might makes is pretty concerning. He mentions that he and Endeavor only got to talk after All Might had deteriorated. And I'm just thinking, like, okay, is that an indicator? Is that a really sly way of saying that Izuku and Bakugo are only going to talk after Izuku potentially self-destructs? Because that'd be pretty horrible. Page 13, Bakugo is dragging Endeavor along. Like, he really wants to end this. And meanwhile, we have this look on Izuku's face. He practically looks like a character from Fire Force. So this is kind of concerning. It does, again, paint a very interesting picture about Izuku's psyche here. Page 14, beautiful shot, absolutely beautiful. And we have Izuku noting Shigaraki is taking longer to heal, and that Izuku also destroyed his left arm, so that's good to know that it is actually fully gone. That's why he probably has it bandaged up with Black Whip. At this point, what I can really say is that I really hope that Eri is one day going to be able to heal this, because this is pretty unfortunate. On page 15, what matters is Shigaraki's fear. So what's really interesting here is just remember, this was the guy that made Izuku and Bakugo feel like they were about to die. And now look at him. He's in fear. He's trying to block Izuku. So that's actually a pretty nice flip on the situation. And one more thing, it's hard to tell if Izuku's eyes are sparking in this particular shot because it's kind of cut off. There might be more control here than before. But I do want to point out that we did see a little bit of sparking back on page 3. It's very interesting. I do hope that the author does tell us what exactly is the significance of the sparking. Like right now, my bet is it's the indicator of Izuku slipping into 50% generally, but it's kind of hard to tell. And that would make sense though if he has 100% on his arm and then 50% on the rest of his body. That makes sense. So with everything else said, that is the end. Where do we go from here? Well, we need to see how the fourth user's death is going to be addressed. Are we going to get a scene where All Might is watching the fight unfold on TV with Eri, and he gives us a quick monologue to tell us what exactly he's fearing? Because I think that'd be a good move. That feels like the most typical move. Is the fourth user's death going to be important? With the current buildup, it seems like it is. The question is, when is that buildup going to be answered? With Bakugo's sense of urgency, it kind of indicates that that buildup is going to be answered within 3 chapters. But the alternative is that buildup is answered at a later arc, which is good because that says there's a later arc. And I still do think that the fourth user is going to be our clue to finding the third and the second user in terms of their identities, or like figuring out more about them. The fourth user most likely knows what the third user's quirk was. I hope that Izuku gets a chance to talk to him eventually. Now, at the end, Izuku saying that he doesn't care, I do think that's an invitation to disaster. I do think that is like famous last words. But ideally, if we're talking about the best case scenario, I do hope that it'll only be the standard backlash of Izuku destroyed his body. Just typical stuff. That'll be better. We have to also wonder, what about Higanto? Like, how is Higanto going to get involved here? At this point, with the setup that we're getting from this chapter, it looks like the battle is about to take another turn. And this is a turn that only Bakugo and All Might can fathom. So we know that the battle is going to change when Higanto arrives. But now we have to deal with this potential change that's going to come from the enemy within, and that being, it's going to come from something going wrong with One for All, if that's the direction we're going in. And so I think with that, the characters to look at for subsequent chapters are definitely going to be All Might, Endeavor, and Bakugo, and maybe Aizawa, dependent on if Aizawa can come in clutch at the last minute and protect Izuku one more time. I think that would be like a really beautiful moment if we can pull it off. But yeah, man, ultimately very concerning. I really hope that this build-up that the author put in this chapter is just, I hope it's nothing. But honestly, like, the fact that he's been working on this since 257 and he's bringing it up now, that is a legitimate concern. But we'll have to see. Anyway, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'm gonna call it there. Till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.